All right, we're still in our materials, real estate law for paralegals. We are in chapter 4, and we're going to be talking about regulations and encumbrances. So in this first part, we're going to focus on government regulations. So we've been learning about property and ownership and our rights in property and our ownership rights in general. And so now we're going to look at how those rights are limited. Right now, we're going to focus on how the government can limit those rights. So the government can limit your rights in land in a couple different ways. So you can do it through zoning, through eminent domain, and through taxation. So what is zoning? Well, zoning is the division of a county or city or a town into districts based on their particular use. So this division is called a master plan, and this is sort of the city's or county's framework for the economic plan for the city, right? How they want it to look and how they want it to feel and how they want the traffic to flow. That's all part of the master plan, and so the zoning is made around that master plan. So when we talk about zoning into particular use, it's things like industrial, right? So they put all the factories together, that all the refineries and things like that, all the industrial, heavy machinery, heavy noise, heavy pollutant, kind of stuff. They stick all that stuff together. And then they have areas that are meant just for residential, so single-family homes, apartments, condos, townhouses, things like that. And they'll also have an area that's made for commercial, so you'll have malls and shopping centers and different kinds of retail stores. And they also make an area for green space, parks and recreational areas, rivers and lakes and ponds and things for activities to preserve the natural characteristics of the city or town or wherever. So I got something I want to show you. So this is a zoning map of Washington, D.C. So you can see all the different colors, and each color has a different use. So we can zoom in a little bit. If we scroll down, we can kind of see the legend down here. So we got a downtown zone, mixed use zone, neighborhood zone, production, distribution, and repair zone, apartment zone, special purpose zone. So each color has a different meaning, and each area is limited to that use. And each city is going to be different based on, the shape and design, the area, square footage of the city, the natural resources, bodies of water, mountains, forest. So each city is going to be different, and the zoning is going to be based on its particular needs. All right. So each county, city, or town, or whatever is zoned for these particular uses, and each area can only be used for that particular purpose. However, from time to time, someone wants to do something different within a zone. So let's say they want to have a residential building in a commercial area or a commercial area in a residential zone. If that happens, they ask for what's called a variance. So a variance is just permission or authorization from the city or county or whatever jurisdiction you're in to depart from the zoning law. So there are two kinds of variances. One is called a special exception, the other a non-conforming use. So special exception is when you are given permission to use the property for a use that's not designated in that area. So you're saying it's residential area, but I would like to use my property for commercial purposes. So you ask for a special exception, and if it's granted, then you can use your property for that purpose. The other variance is called non-conforming use. So this is something that was pre-existing before the zoning regulation came to be. So for example, let's say you have an old gas station that was built in an area that before the zoning came to be, or it was zoned commercial, and then later they wanted to change the zoning to residential. So this gas station is there. It was fine and legal and no problems before the zoning, but now the area is zoned residential, and so the gas station doesn't comply. They asked for a variance for non-conforming use because they were already there. All right, so zoning is one way that the government can regulate how you can use your property. And taxation is another. So what is taxation? Well, most of us should know this, right? Because we get taxed all the time by our government. So tax is a monetary charge that's imposed by the government on people or entities, and that's how they make money, right? That's how the public government makes its revenue. Of course, that revenue is then spent on things like roads and military security, things like that. Government aid and other financial assistance. Our tax dollars hard at work for that stuff. So we get taxed in lots of different ways. So most of us live in the United States. And if you live in the United States and you work like most of us do, then you know you got to pay the IRS, income tax. And of course, within the United States, there are 50 states. Most of us live in one of those states or some territory of America. And of course, the states also have some tax, right? So we pay things like sales tax. Some states even have income tax. So in addition to paying the federal government on your income, you got to pay your state on your income. And then within each state, we have counties. Texas has 254 of them. And then within each county, we have cities. And within each city, we have school districts and utility districts and things like that. So we keep getting divided smaller and smaller and smaller into these different jurisdictions. And when we get down to the county and the city level, that's when they start charging you a property tax. And property tax, you'll hear it sometimes called the ad valorem tax. And ad valorem just means tax that's imposed on the value. Excuse me. So ad valorem tax is a tax imposed on the value of the property. Before we get to the next regulation from the government, I want to share something else with you. So this is the tax information, property tax information for Jeff Bagwell house that was in your deed assignment. So you'll see right here, these are the different jurisdictions that tax this property. So remember I said we have the counties, and then we have the cities, and then we have school districts and utility districts and things like that. So here we have, the county and the county flood control. Then we have some city, right, for the Port of Houston. And then we have school district. So each one of these jurisdictions taxes this property. And here is a rate at which they tax it. And this guy, his house is worth over $11 million, so his tax is pretty steep. So you see how many different jurisdictions you're being taxed by if you own property. And each property is going to have different jurisdictions because it's going to be located in different areas. So this particular property is subject to certain jurisdiction taxes, and then another property across town is going to have a different school district. It's going to have a different hospital district. It's going to have a different city, tax or whatever. So each property is going to be a little bit different, and they're each going to have maybe a little bit different rates. So this is just some general information that is found at the appraisal district for Harris County, which is the government entity that is responsible for valuing your property. This appraised value down here, that's the ad valorem. That's the value of the property that's being taxed. So just in case you're curious, so this guy's taxes last year, just for these entities right here, so Spring Branch ISD, Hunters Creek, then I'm not sure what MDWA stands for off the top of my head. Here's where his tax bill, just a mere $147,971.29 for his property. That's pretty steep in my book. Of course, he does have an $11 million house. That's only half of the taxes. So the other jurisdictions, right, Harris County Flood, Port of Houston Authority, Hospital District, they tax him as well. And this one is only just a mere $57,000. So together, his 147 and 157, this guy pays $200,000 a year in property taxes. So if you're out there and you're thinking, man, it must be nice to be rich, I don't know, paying $200,000 a year and just to keep your house seems a little much to me. But I don't know. I've never had an $11 million house, so I'll tell you when that day ever gets here. But so you can see property taxes can be quite expensive depending on the value of your home. So if you have a $100,000 house, your taxes are much, much, much less. All right, so now that we've learned about taxes, we're going to talk about eminent domain. So what is eminent domain? Well, this is the power that the federal, or state, or local governments have to take private property for public use. So if you kind of had a problem with adverse possession and you thought, man, that's pretty bad that someone can come and take your property like that, with an eminent domain, it is probably not going to sit well with you either, because that's the government saying that they can just come in and take your property. So it's the Fifth Amendment that actually allows them to what's called take your property. And because it's the government and it's the Constitution, there are some limits, or I should say some requirements that have to go along with it. So first you have to have due process. The use that they're taking your property for has to be public, and you have to be compensated, just compensation. So due process. This is basically making sure that you receive a fair trial, that you have what they call notice and opportunity to be heard, right? So the government tells you that they're going to take your land, right? They give you notice, and then they give you an opportunity to go into court and complain about it and make sure that someone listens to you. It's basically what it is in a takings situation, right? It's called notice and opportunity to be heard. And it just kind of makes sure that the system doesn't take advantage of you. So the next one is public use. So public use just means some benefit that the public gets from the use of the property. So the public doesn't actually have to use the property. They just have to realize some benefit. So most of the time when we have a taking, it's going to be for like a road, right? So they want to expand a highway or build a new freeway, and so people's land is in the way, so they have to come and take it and use it for that road. Sometimes they'll take it for natural habitats, right? There's an endangered, animal in the area, and they want to take some land and make sure that that animal is protected. But occasionally, they can say they can take private land and give it to some private company, right, like a business, uh, and they'll call it like urban renewal or urban development. And that basically means they're taking some land, giving it to some big business who's supposed to build their factory and bring jobs to that particular town. So the public use is pretty broad. So almost anything is in the realm of public use if they can sell it to the government when the court good enough. And then lastly, we have just compensation. So this is usually fair market value. So they pay you the value that a willing buyer would be willing to pay for it on the open market. So this is usually what you fight about, because most of the time in eminent domain, the government is going to win. You're not going to beat them and say that you didn't get due process. You're not going to beat them and say that it's not a public use. I mean, it's possible you could, but the chances are you're not going to beat them on any of those, and you're basically going to fight what is just compensation. And so you're going to want to get the most for it as you can. And but normally it's something like fair market value. Right? They're going to pay you what your house or your land is worth on the open market. And of course, then they will pay for some additional things. So let's say you're a store that's on the side of a feeder road on a freeway that's about to be expanded. And because they're going to expand the freeway and tear down your store, that means you're going to have to find a new location, and you're going to have to move, and you're going to have all those costs. So as part of this eminent domain, they will pay you for what the property was worth, plus they'll pay you some extra for all your costs that you're going to have to incur for the move and relocating and things like that. So there is some flexibility in the just compensation, and that's normally what you end up fighting over, because the government's usually going to win if they want to take the property. So if you have all three of these items, due process, public use, and just compensation, then that whole process is called condemnation. That's when they take your property and they pay you, and it's called condemnation. They condemn the property. All right, well, know these things: variance, eminent domain, due process, public use, just compensation, and condemnation. And stay tuned for more Chapter 4.